join your big hand.
I'm JJ. I'm a freelance web developer. I work with clients building websites, as you do. This was part of a website I built last year for a long-term client of mine. It was a small part of the project. And I tend to build things like this as plugins rather than in theme. I don't know JavaScript deeply. I use it, oops, sorry. Oh, sorry. I don't, I can't make it go back, stop. Okay. This is my first talk. I'm going to use rehearsed timings this time. Okay, so I said all the stuff I said before. I'm going to go in from there. Don't know JavaScript deeply, use a lot. This is my first go at React. And my first go at the WP REST API. So, oh, look, wait, I need to put this in. So why would you have a quiz in the first place? I mean, why would you want quizzes on your website? Well, let me ask you some questions. Do you know these Disney films based on just 3 words? What is your Myers-Briggs type? Are you addicted to carbohydrates? Would you have clicked on one of those if it popped up in front of you? Quizzes are clickbait. They bring people into your site. They let people engage with your site, but you don't have the overhead of something like forums where you have to provide ongoing tech support or moderation or worry about libel and stuff like that. So this client wanted quizzes, so we're going to build a quiz. It's a very simple quiz. It has the total time necessary to take the quiz up there in the corner. I hope you can see it. It has a list of the questions with weighted answers. So on this particular quiz, yes is 1 and no gets 0. The results will be based on the sum of the answers chosen. And this is actually a custom post type, but on the index.php template. So it's just the default template. You click an answer, and the next question appears. You click the last answer, and the results appear and tell you your risk. So it's a weighted quiz with risks. So that's what we're building. Again, the top is just the title. The title is the title, like on a normal page template. This is the content. And this is the bit we're building using the REST API in React. And this is all post-spin-up. So why use the WP REST API for this? I'm really happy I did, and I will definitely build any single page app using the REST API next time. I used it because I can get the quiz data in a JSON format, which is easy to bring in and use in the JavaScript app. And any single page app I build is going to be using JavaScript. I've done a single page app before using, like HTML and picking out the bits with jQuery and then manipulating the DOM that way. And it was awful. I never wanted to do it again. I'm so happy that this works. So why React? Well, the short answer is that's what I wanted to learn. And that's actually the long answer too. I mean, I like the look of JSX. It was easy. And I'm not going to talk about Flux or Redux or ES 2015 or any of those other things that people talk about when they talk about React, because I had a very short time scale in which to get this done. And I didn't really want to learn this yet, so I didn't, and I didn't need to. Well, for this app. This plugin was built in the context of a website build. So I was using CMB2 for making meta boxes for my for my metadata. And then you have to use the WP REST API v2. Beta 10 or later, beta 11 is, I think, in the plugin repo. I also used JSON view in Chrome. And it's really helpful. On the left is what a single quiz object looks like without JSON view. And on the right is what a single quiz object in the WP REST API at a single quiz endpoint looks like with JSON view. And this is actually, if you've never seen it before, what the WP REST API gives you. It gives you all the publicly available data about my single quiz type. And then I had to add in the meta, but I did that. And as you can see, it's all available right there to use in an object. There's also React DevTools made by Facebook, and this is available for Chrome and Firefox, which is really useful, although you can't really see it. But it shows you each component and the props and the state for each. So I'm just going to go through the things that were different in setting up the plugin for me to normal, plugin scaffolding. I bundled the dependencies. You can use Webpack or Browserify. You're going to need to compile the JSX to JS and use the Babel with React preset. In September 2015, Babel updated to Babel 6 and stripped out all of its transforms. So you have to add those back in if you want to use them. So the React preset to compile React and ES 2015 if you're using that. And then for the production build in React, you need to set an environment variable node-end to production, which will strip out all the debugging stuff in React and then uglify it. There are a million ways to do this. I use Grunt plus Grunt Browserify plus Babelify plus Babel preset React. And you don't really have to worry about this, but this is the only bit I needed to add to my Grunt file to make it all work. After I got the scaffolding done, I hello worlded it to make sure, it worked. And then I started in on the normal plugin stuff, which was fairly straightforward except for one bit, which I'll get to. Make the custom post type, and you need a place for the quiz on the page. And then you make the meta boxes for the post meta. I'm not going to go over how you register post types, but I just wanted to show you there are 3 extra arguments. This is actually all really straightforward, and I'm hoping I showed that. But there are 3 extra arguments. Show in REST, true. Do you want it to show in the REST API? Yes. They don't show by default. REST-based, this is kind of like the slug. I used MJJ Quizzes API, and then the REST controller class, and because it's a custom post type, it's the WP REST post controller. There's also the users controller and the comments controller, terms controller, and in a separate plugin, the meta controller. And then I said I used the default template. The quiz needs a place to live, and all I did is on single quiz pages, I filtered the content and added in a div at the end. So I have, the title at the top, the content, and then an empty div right now with the ID MJJ quiz, and that is where the quiz is going to go. Now I'm going to make the meta boxes. That was pretty straightforward. Custom post I've done. Make the meta boxes. I'm using CMV2, and I wanted 3 meta keys, quiz meta info, how long the quiz will be, the quiz meta key, which is an associative array with the questions and the answers is an array of associative arrays, each of which contains the information for that particular answer. And then the quiz results meta, which is an associative array with the results range detail. So it holds the title and the lower boundary and the upper boundary and all the results info. This is where I had the problem. I wasn't quite sure what I was doing. And you have to pick through code. It turns out CMV2 does not handle multi-dimensional arrays very well. And this is why there was a problem. And this is a little bit of a digression, but multi-dimensional arrays and metadata can be problematic. So when you hear people talking about how you're going to save meta in like the Fields API and WP REST API, it's hard to abstract out how you're going to escape, sanitize, and validate them. And there's a core track ticket talking about register meta, which almost no one uses, including myself, I don't use it, that adds in some arguments. So you could tell, whoever's going to use this metadata, exactly how to escape, sanitize, and validate it. So what to expect and how to do it. And I just kind of want to mention that because that's relevant when you're talking about the WP REST API and metadata. Of course, that wasn't an issue for me because I already know what I'm putting in and I know what I want to get out. So It's fine. Anyway, so it's all in the table. You have to imagine that all that data is in the post meta table. Now we need to add the post meta to the endpoint. It's not there by default. This is seriously easy. For every REST field you want, you register a REST field. I'm going to have one for each of my meta keys with the object type, which is the custom post type, the attribute, which is going to be used to populate that field, and the args, which will tell it how to populate that field. There's the example of how you register a REST field, MJJ quiz, which is the custom post type, quiz meta key, and the get callback. And get refers to the HTTP request. So the get callback is that function. There's also an update callback, which I'm not using because I'm doing everything in WP admin. I'm not allowing it to be updated by the REST API in the schema, which I'm also not using because I'm kind of lazy. So then we have the REST fields made. We're going to need to populate each REST field with the meta values. So we have the meta key, and then populate it with the meta values. So here, I get the post meta. That's the first thing I want to do. What I haven't mentioned is that I wanted to use Markdown instead of, just plain text or worrying about editors and stuff. And the first time I did this, I parsed it client side. And I got a little worried about it. And I tested it, and I couldn't find an XSS vulnerability, but I didn't look hard enough. In the Facebook documentation, they talk about marked, and there's an open pull request, which fixes some XSS vulnerabilities, but it does have XSS vulnerabilities. So I tried a couple other client-side parsers, and they also had those. So don't trust parsers. What I ended up doing is, because I really wanted to use Markdown, this is how you sanitize. You sanitize as text. WP admin, I'm not rendering as HTML. But I'm parsing for the front end, for my endpoint. And this is not on the front end, this is for the front end. Parsing with parsedown, which also has XSS vulnerabilities. And then running it through WP kisses, which does what it says on the tin. It strips evil scripts. So you're fine if you get your HTML through one of the WordPress functions for escaping and sanitization. And I explicitly wanted to point that out because the Facebook stuff is a little misleading. Okay, so now it's in the tables. We got it in the REST API. Now we're ready to use React. And again, this is my first go at it. So I'm just going to tell you what I wish I had known and what I want to learn. First of all, when you talk about component, React, you talk about components. Each component does one thing. If it can do two things, you make another component. They're the building blocks of React. And they get mocked sometimes, actually. But, oh, sorry. Don't pay attention to that yet. There's a page in the Facebook docs called Building or Thinking in React, and they recommend making and thinking about each component you're going to make first. I use Balsamic for wireframes, and this is, so I decided to wireframe out each component, and it made it super easy. I have the meta info, and then the questions list, which is all the questions. Can that be, divided into different things? Well, yeah, it can. You have a question box with the question and an array of answers. Can that be divided down? Yes. The question? Yes. That's one component. And then all answers is an array of all the answers, and an answer is a single answer. So you just kind of work your way down and make a list of components. And then you're ready to start almost. You have to first tell it where to go. And this is where we're going to use that div we picked on the template, back at the beginning. I'm not going to go over this, but this is the entire file. And I think it has, actually, I don't know that I need bar React up there. But the render method is what puts stuff on the page. And basically I'm saying render the router component in the MJJ quiz ID. So this is how that ID starts getting filled. Second, we need to get the data. We don't have the data. And now the first time I did this the really stupid way, forgetting it was a plugin. There are themes that have been made with React, and they're really cool. But I don't need a client-side router, and I don't need something to handle, I do need something to handle HTTP requests, but I don't need something complicated to handle HTTP requests. I can use jQuery Get, and I have access to jQuery because it's in my theme, and it's on, it's loaded on every page here. So jQuery Get, and then the quiz URL, that endpoint for the single quiz, which actually uses the quiz object ID, so the single quiz ID. And instead of trying to figure out here, like from the slug or doing something clever in JS, I just localized it and put it in the footer on the single quiz pages. Just kind of cheating, I feel like, but it works. Now's the fun part. You get to make all the other components. When you talk about props, you talk about the data. And when we got the data in that last slide, the data comes in at the top in the React application, and then it kind of flows downward through the components, and the various components take out what they need. And the data is called props. And the state is what drives interactivity. When you set the state of a component, you make it re-render again, and that's what causes interactivity. So the first thing you want to do, and this is in thinking in React, again, and it's good advice, is make a static version of your app. And don't worry about state yet. Most components are going to be stateless. And this is what a component looks like. I think the reason I put this one up here is because when you return something to put on the page, you can only return one node at once. I wanted to return a paragraph and the questions list component. I have to wrap it in a div to return one component. So that's deeply satisfying getting to this point. It's like, okay, it's going to work, maybe. So now about state, and so now about interactivity. I'm taking that, oh gosh, this is not accessible, is it, that contrast? Anyway.
I don't know, without testing it, I couldn't tell.
Talking to or something. Okay, so the easiest bit of interactivity in this app is if I click yes, I want no to gray out. Maybe more gray, less white, but I click yes, I want no to gray out. And that's the bit of interactivity I'm going to talk right now. How do I do that? How do I tell the no button that the yes button has been clicked? Who owns that state to re-render it? Well, if you remember, the answers is an array of all the buttons. And what you do is pick out the bit that you're going to use for the interaction that you interact with, and then all the other components that are going to be affected by that interaction that you want to re-render. And then you find a common component above them that's common to all of them, and that's who owns the state. So in this example, the answers own the state. Now managing states. This is where this becomes not scalable. However, I've done it the most explicit way without using anything else possible. So this is managing state at its most basic and completely oversimplified. An event happens. I click the button. This invokes a callback which was passed in via props. So that parent component, that the answers array, passes the callback down to each button in the array. The button that's clicked calls the callback and sets the state in the parent. And when the state in the parent is set, it triggers a re-render of the answers array and all the answers. And then the children props are render with new props from the parent. So you click a button, the button tells the parent, I've been chosen, and the parent says, okay, you've been chosen, you haven't, render that way. And that's how state works. And we'll be more advising in a bit. So now you've got something that's working, and React is very quick, and when you press something, it just pops up on the page. But maybe you want it to fade in, and maybe you want some other animations. The first time I did this the really stupid way, and Googled React and Velocity, because I use Velocity.js for all my animations. And it recommended, bundling and velocity component. It was rather complicated. But when I came back to it, I realized I could wait until a component had mounted, rendered itself on the page, and then run an animation on it. And that was much easier. I have velocity in my theme because I use it for animations. And so I used it when the component mounted. And there's a method, component did mount, where you can do anything you need to do after component mounts. And any adding up or anything like that, you do after the components have mounted. So once all the quiz answers have been, answered, it adds them up and then re-renders the results at the bottom. Basically, any outside libraries like JS libraries you're going to use in React, you use them here in component did mount after the component has mounted. What's next? Redux. I really want to learn Redux because it's about managing state. And if I know how to manage state, then this becomes fairly, it can just do so much. Making the components is super easy. Using the WP REST API is super easy. And Redux will just make it dance. You'll be able to do anything with it. I might be overstating it a little bit, but it'll be really cool. But then I want to learn ES 2015. And the reason I want to learn that is because there is a tutorial by Dan Abramoff on Egghead.io that uses ES 2015, so I want to learn enough to do that tutorial. That's it. Oh, thank you.